There is a question hidden inside the Bible that almost no one dares to answer openly. If the flood truly wiped out every living thing on earth, then why do giants appear again in the scriptures long after Noah left the ark? This is not mythology, speculation, or internet fantasy. The mystery is already written into the ancient texts themselves, and once you see it, the entire story of the flood begins to change. Genesis chapter 6 speaks of the Nephilim before the waters came. Then, centuries later, Numbers 13 describes giant beings once again living in Canaan. The spies of Israel reported, "We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes. How could creatures connected to the world before the flood still exist afterward?" The Book of Enoch, preserved for generations outside the biblical canon, describes the Nephilim as the offspring of fallen watchers and human women. These beings were described as powerful figures connected to ancient knowledge said to exist before the flood traditions. Scripture says that all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth, and that the earth was filled with violence before the flood began. Yet, after the destruction, traces of those same bloodlines appear again. The Anakim, the Rephaim, and the king Og of Bashan emerge in regions connected to ancient mountain strongholds. Deuteronomy even records the enormous iron bed of Og as evidence of his unnatural size. The common explanation claims another rebellion of angels happened after the flood, but many researchers argue that answer leaves too many contradictions unresolved. Ancient apocryphal fragments suggest a different possibility, one the official narrative rarely discusses. What if some of the Nephilim never truly perished in the flood at all? And before we go deeper, tell me this in the comments. If the flood destroyed the ancient world completely, how do giants appear again throughout Scripture afterward? Because the answer may change everything you thought you knew about Genesis. If the Nephilim truly endured beyond the flood, then the world before Noah may have been far more advanced than anyone imagined. The ancient texts do not describe a primitive civilization struggling to survive. They describe a forgotten age overflowing with forbidden knowledge, towering power, and mysteries buried beneath thousands of years of silence. The Book of Enoch tells of the Watchers descending upon Mount Hermon, where they revealed secrets humanity was never meant to possess. They taught the working of metals, the movements of the heavens, the reading of the stars, and the crafting of structures designed to endure across generations. Genesis declares that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Yet, alongside that corruption came astonishing knowledge that seemed to appear suddenly in the ancient world. Their offspring, the Nephilim, were not merely giants in size. According to the ancient writings, they ruled through hierarchy, power, and inherited wisdom beyond human understanding. The Book of Jubilees hints that some among them possessed extraordinary abilities tied to architecture and sacred construction. Massive stone foundations, impossible cuts in rock, and ancient megalithic sites scattered across the earth have caused generations of historians to ask the same question: who taught humanity to build like this? Then, as the mystery deepens, another name emerges from the shadows of history: Atlantis. Centuries after the flood narrative entered Hebrew tradition, Plato described a mighty civilization swallowed by the sea in a single catastrophic event. He claimed the story came from Egyptian priests, preserving records far older than Greece itself. According to their accounts, Atlantis possessed immense engineering knowledge, powerful rulers, and monumental structures unlike anything known in the classical world. And the parallels become difficult to ignore. Both traditions speak of a world destroyed by water. Both describe semi-divine rulers connected to beings greater than men. Both portray an advanced civilization erased in sudden judgment. Even the timeline surrounding Atlantis echoes theories connected to the ancient flood traditions surrounding the Black Sea and the Near East. But the deeper question is the one few dare to ask openly. What if Atlantis was not a separate legend at all? What if different civilizations were remembering the same lost world from different directions of history? A world ruled before the flood by beings the scriptures call the Nephilim. What if Atlantis was never just a lost island in the sea? What if it was the final memory of the entire world that existed before the flood, a civilization tied directly to the beings described in Genesis and the Book of Enoch. The ancient writings describe the Watchers constructing enormous strongholds in places far beyond the reach of ordinary men. Enoch speaks of vast structures carved into mountain stone, built with knowledge humanity could not have developed alone. These were not temporary cities of wood and clay. They were engineered to endure catastrophe itself, and the locations are impossible to ignore. Mount Hermon, where the Watchers first descended according to Enoch, rises high above the surrounding lands. Ararat and Sinai also appear repeatedly in traditions connected to divine encounters and ancient survival. Scripture says that the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth. Yet, some researchers argue that the highest elevations of the ancient Near East may never have been fully consumed by a regional flood event. Yet one overlooked detail may completely change the entire narrative. Fragments from the Book of Giants describe terrifying dreams spreading among the Nephilim before destruction arrived. They knew judgment was coming. Noah responded by building an ark under God's instruction, but other traditions suggest certain groups chose another path entirely. Instead of escaping across the waters, they prepared places hidden beneath the earth itself. The texts describe sealed chambers under mountains and deep beneath the ground, protected by knowledge inherited from the Watchers. Suddenly, Plato's account of Atlantis begins to sound far less symbolic. He wrote of underground passages, enormous foundations, sacred inner chambers, and engineering designed to survive overwhelming floods. Egyptian priests told Solon that the civilization possessed systems connecting every region beneath the surface. And that detail may be one of the most unsettling clues of all, because the image emerging from these traditions is not of a world caught by surprise. It is the image of a civilization preparing for annihilation long before the waters came. A civilization whose rulers may have believed they could outlast divine judgment itself. Stay with this carefully, because the evidence only becomes more disturbing from here. The next discoveries beneath the earth and under the sea may explain why the giant bloodlines appear again after the flood. And if even a fragment of those accounts is true, then the flood did not erase every trace of that ancient world. Some part of it may have gone underground and waited for the waters to pass. But what if the flood did not cover the earth in the way most people imagine? Hidden inside the biblical account are details that have fueled debate for centuries. Genesis says the waters rose 15 cubits upward and the mountains were covered. Yet some scholars argue the language reflects the world known to the ancient Near East rather than the entire planet. That distinction matters because towering regions like Hermon stand far above the surrounding lands connected to the earliest flood traditions. If parts of those mountain ranges remained above the waters, then whatever had been built there before, the catastrophe may never have been completely destroyed. Suddenly, the ancient stories about hidden strongholds and preserved knowledge begin to sound far less impossible. But as the evidence expands, the mystery becomes even more disturbing. Ancient Syriac traditions and Ethiopian texts describe certain Nephilim as possessing abilities inherited from the Watchers themselves. The Book of Enoch portrays these beings as more than flesh and blood. They crossed the boundary between the spiritual and the physical world, carrying knowledge humanity was never meant to inherit. Some passages symbolically describe extraordinary abilities associated with the descendants linked to the Watchers' traditions, and that may explain why the giants appear again after the flood. Numbers 13 records the spies entering Canaan and encountering the sons of Anak. Their report is chilling. "We were in our own sight as grasshoppers." Deuteronomy later describes entire tribes of giant warriors occupying fortified cities behind massive walls. These were not isolated legends appearing once in Scripture. They re-emerge repeatedly across generations after the waters had already passed. So where did they come from? Rabbinic writings preserve one controversial tradition about Og, king of Bashan. According to later accounts, Og survived the flood itself and lived into the days of Moses. His enormous iron bedstead is specifically mentioned in Deuteronomy, almost as if the biblical text wanted future generations to remember that beings of unnatural size once walked the earth. But even that explanation feels incomplete, because other ancient traditions suggest survival was not accidental. Some accounts imply certain bloodlines endured through hidden refuges, protected locations prepared long before judgment arrived. And if that is true, then the reappearance of the giants after the flood was never a mystery at all. It was evidence that part of the old world had survived. Ancient traditions claim the Nephilim were not erased completely by the flood. While many died, some bloodlines and forbidden knowledge may have survived through hidden refuges, prepared before judgment fell upon the earth. Apocryphal writings describe sealed chambers inside mountains, protected places built to endure catastrophe. Then archaeology begins uncovering evidence that appears to echo those ancient traditions. Sites like the pyramids, Mycenaean fortresses, and Göbekli Tepe contain construction methods far beyond what many expect from the ancient world. Göbekli Tepe is especially mysterious because it was intentionally buried beneath massive amounts of earth thousands of years ago. Archaeologists confirmed the burial was deliberate, not natural erosion. Why would an ancient civilization hide and preserve an enormous sacred complex unless they feared something devastating was coming? Its location deepens the mystery even more. Göbekli Tepe stands near the same regions associated with Ararat and the flood traditions found in Genesis. But the most astonishing discoveries are hidden underground. Beneath Derinkuyu in Cappadocia lies a massive underground city carved deep into volcanic rock. It contains tunnels, wells, ventilation systems, storage rooms, and enough space to shelter thousands of people for extended periods. The deepest levels appear older than the upper sections, and researchers still debate who first built them. Ancient Hittite records even speak of powerful ancestors connected to underground sanctuaries. At that point, the pattern becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. The Book of Enoch describes hidden chambers. Plato wrote of underground systems beneath Atlantis. Across the Near East, enormous subterranean structures appear in regions tied directly to flood traditions. What if these places were not simply shelters from war? What if they were built to survive the destruction of an entire world? Derinkuyu was not an isolated discovery. More than 200 underground cities have been identified throughout Cappadocia alone, forming a network so vast it suggests planning on the scale of an entire civilization. And the mysteries do not stop beneath the earth. They continue beneath the sea itself. Research beneath the Black Sea uncovered submerged structures resting nearly 90 meters underwater, including what appear to be the remains of ancient foundations. Before catastrophe transformed the region, the Black Sea is believed to have been a massive freshwater lake. Then came a violent flooding event as waters from the Mediterranean rushed inward with overwhelming force. Yet some of the submerged structures were not shattered by the disaster. They remained standing beneath the water, preserved almost intact. And that discovery forces an even deeper question, because it suggests their builders may have understood exactly what was coming. The Book of Enoch claims the Watchers taught forbidden skills to humanity, including advanced knowledge of stonework and construction. Across the world, ancient sites display techniques that still challenge explanation today. In Peru, the stones of Sacsayhuaman fit together with astonishing precision despite weighing over 100 tons. In Bolivia, Pumapunku contains cuts and angles so exact that modern researchers continue debating how they were achieved. Similar megalithic patterns appear in Egypt, Malta, Anatolia, and other distant regions, separated by oceans and centuries. It is as if fragments of the same lost knowledge were scattered across the earth after the flood. And the deeper researchers dig beneath mountains, beneath deserts, and beneath the sea, the harder it becomes to dismiss the possibility that an advanced world existed long before recorded history began. If remnants of the ancient world truly survived the flood, then the giants who appeared afterward were not random legends. They were the continuation of something far older. Scripture repeatedly places them in the same regions connected to the earliest traditions of the Watchers and the Nephilim. The Anakim emerged in Canaan. The Rephaim occupied territories surrounding Mount Hermon, the very mountain linked in the Book of Enoch to the descent of the Watchers. In Bashan, giant kings ruled fortified cities of stone. Deuteronomy describes Og of Bashan with an iron bedstead so enormous it became part of the biblical record itself. And centuries later, another giant stepped onto the biblical stage, Goliath of Gath. 1 Samuel describes him as a warrior of terrifying size and strength, standing among the Philistines near the Dead Sea region, an area scarred by ancient catastrophe. Nearby lay Sodom and Gomorrah, cities Genesis says were destroyed by fire from heaven. Even today, the region bears signs of violent geological upheaval, unlike almost anywhere else on Earth. But another ancient text pushes the mystery even further. The Book of Baruch speaks of sealed repositories guarded by heavenly messengers, hidden places preserving knowledge and life before destruction arrived. Some traditions use a word connected to ark, but not an ark that floated upon the waters like Noah's. These were fixed sanctuaries buried beneath mountains or hidden below the earth, designed to survive from within. And with that, the entire flood narrative begins to look very different. Because the apocryphal writings, the Qumran fragments, and the Ethiopian traditions all suggest the same unsettling possibility. Not everyone perished in the flood, and not every survivor escaped upon Noah's Ark. Some may have endured through hidden refuges prepared long before the judgment began. The deeper problem with the flood story is not theological, but historical. Scripture says the waters destroyed the world, yet later books of the Bible describe giants living in Canaan with no clear explanation for their return. Numbers, Deuteronomy, and Joshua all mention powerful tribes connected to unusual size and strength. That contradiction has never fully disappeared. Ancient apocryphal writings offer another possibility. They describe hidden refuges in mountains and beneath the earth where parts of the old world may have survived the catastrophe. And modern geology makes that theory harder to dismiss than many expect. The Caucasus, Taurus, and Zagros mountain ranges surrounding the Black Sea contain some of the highest peaks in the Near East. Many rise far above levels that even major regional flood models could cover. These same regions are closely tied to Ararat and the earliest geography described in Genesis. If protected shelters existed there, they may have endured long after the waters passed. The Book of Enoch describes the Watchers' traditions as involving beings associated with unusual knowledge and influence beyond ordinary societies. That detail becomes important when later biblical texts suddenly reintroduce giant clans after the flood narrative ends. Perhaps the giants who appeared in Canaan were not a new phenomenon at all. Perhaps they were the final remnants of an ancient world that was never completely erased. One final connection ties the Nephilim to Atlantis, in a way few researchers openly discuss. Plato never presented Atlantis as a simple myth. He described it as a true account preserved through ancient records passed down from Egyptian priests. And once the two traditions are placed side by side, the similarities become impossible to ignore. Plato said the rulers of Atlantis descended from Poseidon and a mortal woman named Cleito. That pattern mirrors the description of the Nephilim in Genesis, beings born from the union of heavenly figures and women of the earth. Even the symbolism surrounding Poseidon connects to the ancient traditions. In Greek mythology, he ruled both the deep seas and the high mountains, the same two places linked in apocryphal texts to the survival of the Nephilim. The parallels continue to grow. The Greek world remembered Atlantis as a civilization swallowed by water. Hebrew tradition described the antediluvian world destroyed in the flood. Both accounts speak of advanced societies, semi-divine rulers, and catastrophic judgment descending upon the earth, and both quietly imply that not everything vanished completely. The Egyptian priests of Sais claimed they preserved records from before Atlantis disappeared. But if the ancient world had truly been erased, who carried that knowledge forward? According to the logic found in both traditions, the answer may be the same. Survivors remained hidden in protected refuges within mountains, beneath the earth, or below the waters themselves. The Nephilim and their descendants, bearers of forbidden knowledge from the ancient world, may have endured long enough for fragments of their story to pass into every civilization that came afterward. But one final question changes everything. Did the Nephilim truly vanish, or did fragments of their legacy survive into the world that followed? The ancient texts never give a complete answer, yet they never fully close the door either. The Book of Enoch speaks of the spirits of the Nephilim remaining upon the earth, while the New Testament warns that as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Whatever existed before the flood was not meant to be forgotten completely, and the echoes of that world appear everywhere. Cultures separated by oceans and thousands of years preserved remarkably similar stories about giant beings who survived a catastrophic flood. The Anakim of Hebrew tradition, the giant clans of the Caucasus, and the accounts preserved in Ethiopian texts all describe powerful figures connected to mountains, deep waters, and knowledge beyond ordinary humanity. Even archaeology continues, adding new questions instead of removing them. Beneath the seas lie submerged ruins. Across the Near East stand ancient structures whose origins remain uncertain. Every discovery seems to point toward a forgotten chapter of history that may have been larger, older, and more advanced than we were taught to believe. And perhaps that is the real mystery. According to certain ancient traditions, stories connected to the Nephilim may have continued long after the flood narratives ended. Some traditions suggest survivors may have preserved fragments of ancient knowledge in remote refuges before the catastrophe described in the texts within mountain strongholds, underground chambers, and sealed sanctuaries beneath the earth. From those survivors, the legends of the giants continued. The kings of Bashan, the Anakim of Canaan, and the ancient memories behind Atlantis may all be fragments of the same lost world, an antediluvian civilization that vanished beneath judgment, yet somehow left traces behind for future generations to uncover. So what do you believe? Were the Nephilim completely destroyed? Or did fragments of their world survive in hidden places after the flood? Leave your theory below, because the next investigation goes even deeper into the lost knowledge buried beneath the ancient world.